Another year of life. God
Yep.
has blessed you.
May next year be a little bit easier than this past year.
There's only 5 on.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday study session that has no name, very similar to Clint Eastwood in all of those wonderful spaghetti westerns of the 1960s. Today, we have a really wonderful group as we're going to be studying about Passover on an apropos day, St. Patrick's Day, because we know St. Patrick's Day and Passover are pretty much synonymous with each other, and you can't think of one without the other. That was sarcasm. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Passover and the Seder this week and next week. I have plenty of material, enough for several hours, and we'll get to as much. Some of it will be about the Seder, some of it about the holiday. Somebody asked about world traditions, so I brought some of that into it as well. So we'll get quite a mix. And of course, with everybody here so knowledgeable, we'll get a lot more information. And if anybody has any questions, obviously just ask. So first of all, welcome, happy Passover. It's going to be a week from Saturday night. So a week from Friday night, we're going to be doing our family service, and a week from Saturday night, our synagogue service. If anybody wants food from our congregation or wants the stuff for the Passover plate, the harosets, and all that, make sure to call by tomorrow because all the food is being bought tomorrow. So please do that. And I think we have I think we have 100 people already. So we want to make sure we get enough for everyone. So what I thought we'd talk about today, first of all, is kitniot, because that was always the biggest discussion in the pre-pandemic days, especially over the last few years. What are kitniot? Does anybody know? And if not, I'll explain it.
Basically legumes, like green beans and any bean. And, for years, the Sephardic never didn't eat them, but the Ashkenaz said, well, if you make it into flour, it can rise. So they didn't, they didn't eat it. But then it's a favorite topic of mine, by the way.
Perfect. Keep going. You're doing great.
I don't know. I guess about 5-6 years ago, the conservative rabbinical council decided that you could eat kitniot, and I thought their reasoning was terrible. The main reason was Passover is expensive, and by not eating beans, you're making it more expensive. And really the halakha is kind of here and there. So go to it.
And basically that's what is kitniot. Although translation is beans or legumes actually more appropriate. Kitniot are anything and everything that you're not allowed to eat on Passover that doesn't come under the original rules. So the original rules are basically you don't eat anything risen from these specific grains, wheat, and the other grains. I never remember, oats, whatever the other grains are, barley, I know what they are. But through the years, there have been other things added to the can't eat list. And there are several reasons for it. The reasons for not eating these are pretty weak as well. And as Michael mentioned, it only was in the Ashkenazic world where they added these rules. And it goes to a general idea that the Sephardic Jews are living in the world. Like the Sephardic Jews were living in the rest of the world. They studied non-Jewish educational subjects such as math, the language of the land, physiology, psychology, literature. So they were living in the world. The Ashkenazic Jews, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, were not living in the world. They were in their walled-off cities or in their shtetls. So they spent a lot of extra time making rules. They made a lot of extra rules because that's what they had the time to do. And kitniot became one of the most famous rules, basically to make Passover even more difficult to keep. So they added all of these extra foods into the mix. What are some of them? Obviously legumes, because that's what kitniot means, but also rice, recently kasha, millet, beans, lentils, peas, sesame seeds, mustard, corn, green peas, snow peas, chickpeas, soybeans, sunflower, poppy seeds, all of these things that would not generally be considered unkosher for Passover. Some things you would think would have gotten in, like potatoes, were never put in kitniot for various reasons. So why did they add these things? Basically, they said, one, because things like corn, you can make cakes out of it that mimic wheat cakes. So it looks like it's wheat cakes, but they're not. Soy you can use to make products that mimic products that are not allowed for Passover. Also, all of these grains and stuff are mixed together, are set together in storerooms. And sometimes some of the wheat may get in the cornmeal or the rice things. And so it's generally said you don't keep these rules. You don't eat these things. However, as Michael said, the Sephardic movement just a few years ago said that it is okay to eat kitniot. One, because of the cost was becoming prohibitive. Another, because it was just a custom that had become enacted. It's not an original rule. It's a custom that everybody was following. Also, that because things are processed so differently these days and things are not stored in the same place in open containers, really the chances of this happening are very limited. And so it was only maybe 5 years ago, I don't know the exact year, that this all happened. And so when you come to Passover, you will have people who will eat kitniot, people who won't, and people who don't know what it is. And so wherever you go, you have to really pay attention to whether you're allowed to eat these certain types of foods. And you'll see that it really depends sometimes on when you're from, and sometimes just what your tradition is. Other foods, and most famously, a few years ago, there was a major debate for the food that no one can spell, and that, of course, is quinoa. Because quinoa, you would think, would be kitniot, because you can make stuff out of it. You can make quinoa bread and noodles and all these things. So it seems like you could, but there is an edict saying that any of these new things that are found after the original rules of kitniot are placed, you don't have to do it for them. And since quinoa only became a discussion in recent years, they decided almost across the board that quinoa would be okay to be in Passover. So it is pretty much not on anybody's kitniot list. There's other debates when it comes to kitniot. What about corn oil or soybean oil? Or peanut oil, though peanuts are, some would say yes or no. Oils are not going to be in the same containers or next to each other where there's going to be, some sort of wheat oil going into the corn oil. And so you have to debate, is oil okay? What about canola oil, which is from rapeseed oil, which is rapeseed, which I don't know, but it is sort of a grain. And so there's all the debates over the oils. So there's a lot of different views. For instance, canola oil is okay, even though the oats are sometimes placed near the wheat grain. And so it's really dependent on when this debate was created and who you are as to whether you're going to eat these things. Some people are very strict. For me, I do not eat kitniot during Passover because in previous years, my diet was so limited and rice was basically the basis for my entire diet for years that if I ate kitniot, then there'd be absolutely no difference for Passover for me at all. If I could eat sushi on Passover, if I could have white rice, raw fish, and soy sauce, then it's basically, there's no difference for me between Passover and any other day of the year. Now that I have a fuller meal that I can eat a lot more things, I may debate that. So that's what kitniot is. And the Reform movement, obviously, kitniot has not been a big deal. It has never been part of it. In the Sephardic world, it's never been part of it. And so, and every so often, a new food will become part of the vernacular of our world. And so they have to decide. So basically, you don't eat kitniot at the same time. You stop eating kitniot at the same time you start eating the other Passover foods for Passover. And so, however, there are subtle differences. For instance, if you have canned corn, some would say you can keep that in your house and you don't have to technically sell it off or hide it because it's canned and it's kitniot. You can't eat it, but you don't have to worry about moving it. So there's a lot of debates about all the nuances. Any questions about kitniot? I always like to bring that up because that is always the biggest discussion for any year, obviously, until the pandemic times. So that's kitniot. Noel and Stuart.
So you can't have olive oil.
Is
Olive oil would be in.
olive oil, I believe, is not part of kitniot, but I have to double check that because I don't cook. I don't think that. No, olive oil, I'm pretty sure, is not considered kitniot, even though it could, because it could mimic the oil of. But you got to remember, olive oil is such a staple as well, especially in Israel, that was going to be a hard one. But olive oils, also, I guess they're considered also a fruit or a vegetable. But yeah, that was actually one of the ones debated because the oils can seem so similar to each other.
I just took a quick look at the Chabad website because I was curious, and even among the Chabad, quinoa is not considered hummus.
Yeah.
It's specifically listed as okay.
And that pretty much went across the board. I guess, it's more the fun of the debates than the answer itself. That's really what's exciting. And so it's nice to spend 5, 10, 15, 20 years debating this new food, which is not new, but they don't really debate these foods until they become really popular. So that's why kasha is a much older food. So that's why I kind of made it in. Larry.
Yeah, just a question on how clean does the factory have to be? I remember in olden days when we were growing up, there was the claim that the additional costs, like Manischewitz would claim that, they had to go back and stop their factory, and now they were producing, clean everything out and make sure that, nothing that was chametz would have touched something that would be new, whether it's, this strawberry jelly, even though it was made in the same process. And does the reform movement, the labeling, could you discuss a little bit about this? There's all kinds of labeling. I know with kosher for Passover quinoa, not quinoa, kiniyot and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's a really good question because, again, everything has to be taken in consideration, including the time of preparation, the cost, and the ability to do so. So if you have a giant factory, you may not want to produce kosher for Passover stuff because you will have to clean out everything. And it's not about cleanliness, it's about getting rid of all of the chametz. So a lot of places will just close the factory and say, we're not going to produce anything during this 9-day period, 8-day period. And it makes it a lot easier and it saves money. Some organizations or some companies try and stay kosher for Passover all year long. And so you don't have to do that. Restaurants most restaurants that are kosher will just close because then you have to move all of your stuff and you have to clean out everything and not allowed to work on the first days of Passover anywhere, the last days of Passover. So it's not worth it. So it just depends on who you are. If you're going to make money from it, then you're going to probably become kosher for Passover. You just need to be clean and you basically need to be under rabbinic supervision. You can only be kosher for Passover according to halachically, the way the ultra-Orthodox do it is if you're kosher during the year already. Like they won't come to like a regular factory that is not kosher already and say you're kosher for Passover. The Reform movement uses a lot of these designations because they're making it. Why not? But most people in the Reform movement are not as strict. But remember, there's some things that are seemingly kosher for Passover and some that are not. There's a lot of matzah out there that's not kosher for Passover because they make it year round. And so or they make it year round and then they kosher for Passover their factory but the non-kosher for Passover matzah is already out there. So when you go to buy the matzah at the store, there may be, and because most stores don't know the difference, there'll be kosher for Passover matzah with not kosher for Passover matzah. It's the same matzah, the same factory, tastes exactly the same, except for one type, they did a special cleaning for it. So, but some people are very strict. Again, the Sephardim are generally a lot less strict. Now, what's interesting, and you have to be extra careful, is you can go to the store, go to whatever store you purchase your kosher for Passover supplies, the big Kroger, of course, Publix, the two main ones down here, and you'll see something that is halachically very strictly kosher for Passover. My favorite, of course, would be like any snack food that has something is not going to be kosher for Passover, corn snacks, or Bamba, which is the peanut butter puffs. And it says kosher for Passover, but then you say to yourself, wait a minute, it must not be real corn, but it is real corn. How can it be kosher for Passover? Because it's kosher for Passover for Sephardim. It's kosher for Passover people who keep the Sephardic rules, but not the Ashkenazic rules. So you have to check to make sure it's kosher for Passover, not just kosher, and that it's kosher for Passover, the label that you agree with, whether it's OU or K or any others. And then you have to check that it's kosher for Passover for Ashkenazic people and not just for Sephardic. So there's a lot of checking going on for Passover. And so it makes it more exciting. It also means a lot of people are getting jobs. It means some things are going to be more expensive, but it's only for a week. So, it's not generally too bad, but again, it can be. Jeff, and you're on mute still. Jeff, did you have a question? Okay, I thought you did. Any other question? I can't see everybody. I should probably do a gallery view so I can see everybody.
Does rabbis go to actual factories and inspect things as an Orthodox rabbi would?
The Reform rabbis?
Yeah.
Generally not. I mean, again, kashrut is not one of the things the Reform movement stresses. It gives people the option, and I'm sure there are some where they do, but generally speaking, if, we'll use kosher for Passover supplies if it's there, but most Reform synagogues keep some semblance of kashrut, but not strict, although some are more strict. During my last synagogue was very strict for Passover, but not the rest of the year. So again, it just depends to what they're doing. But no, most cases, rabbis don't go check out. Reform rabbis and conservative rabbis sometimes do and sometimes don't.
So in your last synagogue, you could eat a shrimp risotto during the year, but not on Passover.
Amen. That's important.
So what does this mean? Is kosher for Passover or kosher period going to disappear?
No, definitely not. Because again, we have to understand the age we're in is a lot different. If we lived 100 years ago, none of these would be issues. 100 years ago, you didn't have the labeling and the factories and all these things going on. And 200 years ago, you didn't as well. But with mass production, with Jews feeling so American that we can become more strict or less strict, it's created a whole job market, people trying to be extra strict, more strict than ever before. And so this whole idea of kosher Passover has become strict to the nth degree on a level it's never been in history. Because it used to be you go to the butcher and the butcher says, this is kosher, it's not, whatever. You go to the baker, this is kosher, this is not, no big deal. Now, because of factories, mass people trying to make money and trying to separate themselves, then it's become, but no, there's a lot of people keep kosher and a lot of people don't. And some of us will keep kosher in some ways and not as strict in others. I don't eat kosher meat, but I don't eat non-kosher beef, but I'll eat non-kosher chicken. So again, we all have these little ways of dealing with the rules. Larry.
In your experience, you've been to Israel more than most of us. what happens in Israel? Do restaurants that are kosher, let's say, do they close down during Passover, or do they completely convert? And the same thing with kosher food stores in Israel. I remember in olden days, the corner drugstore, the corner grocery stores, they used to put up curtains, over the other food, and then they would only bring out their own food. Yeah, and the counter, that and things like that. But in Israel, what happens now?
Well, most of the restaurants, not all, but most are closed. Because remember, Passover is tradition. In Israel, it's only 7 days. And, 2 of those days are holidays where you can't be open anyway. So it's only 5 days of business. And plus, most families are cooking for themselves a lot more. So kosher restaurants will generally close. There are a few that will probably clean and will have special Passover menus. As for the stores, it's not the same thing. If you're selling stuff in a grocery store is different than if you are, if you're eating it. So there are ways around these rules. Some places will just put all their stuff in the back and technically sell it to somebody else. And so that's how they get away with it. There are rules about not allowing to sell non-kosher for Passover products during Passover, but there are real, there's legalities around it. If you're a giant store, it's impossible to do this. So you'll do what you said, you either have a covered area or you'll move all the stuff into the back, put a rope around it, technically sell it to a non-Jew or a non-Jewish company. So there's different ways around it. But for the most part, the really traditional Jews, they buy a lot of their stuff beforehand. And so they don't need to go shopping during Passover generally.
And the markets, the open outdoor markets?
They stay open. The outdoor markets, yeah. They'll be closed on Passover. But in some things, like if you're selling fruits and vegetables, it's not that hard. Some will close down for Passover, though, depending on what you sell, like the bakeries and that kind of stuff. They all close down. Stuart.
Not specific to Passover, but if anyone wants to get a real view of what goes on in the industry, there's a wonderful book called Kosher Nation. And that gives a description of everything that's going on, how they go to China, for example, to certify things there and whatnot. And it's a fascinating book and a very easy read, Kosher Nation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, it's a whole industry at this point, which it never was before, but, we're all Americans and we've, industrialized almost everything. So those are 2 interesting things, kitniot and kashrut for Passover. I encourage anybody to keep it up to the level they want. When you're preparing your house for Passover, you're also supposed to clean up the house and then save a couple pieces to burn at the end. Some people will say you don't have to check all areas of the house, only areas in which meals are eaten. You may not have to check the bathroom or not have to check your wine cellar. The wine cellar is the one most often used in the Talmud. And then some would say, well, you need to just do a periphery check in the wine cellar. And the others say, no, you need to be a little bit more thorough, even in the wine cellar, because you may have taken a cracker down and it fell off. But generally speaking, you try and cleanse your house of food. Obviously, one of the more popular ways of doing it is to sell your food. And that's a very popular way of doing it, especially if you have a lot. When I had no food in the house, it was not a big deal. But when you have food, you can close off the cabinets, do something to keep it closed, put tape or rubber band, and then sell your food for $1 to a non-Jewish neighbor. And then after Passover, you give them the $1 back, and then the food is yours again. So it is a legalistic way of getting around the rule. And that's what most restaurants will do. And also most houses and supermarkets and so forth. There are also rules about what you need to do. For instance, if I am going to my cousin's house for all of Passover, do I need to be so strict with my house, or do I just close my door, lock it, and then I don't have to do anything? So there's different debates as to how much you need to do. Also, if you miss Passover entirely, you can do Passover a year later. You just do the Passover Seder and the holy days. You don't need to completely kashrut your house again. So there's all these, Passover has a lot of rules. Rabbis really like to make rules and discuss things, and Passover is one of the most famous because there's so many options. There's also option, when do you have to have your house clean? Is it 4 hours, 5 hours before Passover? Is it the night before? Most would say night before you clean, and 4 or 5 hours beforehand. Some say 4, some say 5. You burn the last chametz and then you're done. But it's going to be what your tradition is. So you may not know anybody who's not Jewish, so who are you going to sell it to? You may have to do it as a community. So, sell it to somebody or a company or something. So that's a little bit about preparation for Passover.
Rabbi,
Jane.
I'm thinking about the Kitniyot. I remember when that came out. It's about 10 years ago. And rice was permissible. Everything was permissible. It was, I don't understand what the difference is. What do you have to sell?
What do you mean for kitniyot? So kitniyot just basically means for some people, they won't eat extra foods. They won't eat rice, legumes, corn. That's all it means.
But even the conservative said, yes, it's permissible.
That was about 5 years ago where the conservative movement said, yes, you can eat this. There are people in the conservative movement who still say, well, I'm not going to do it personally. Because let's say I'm a conservative rabbi. I decide I'm not going to be eating kitniyot. I'm not breaking any rules. I'm just not eating more than I'm not supposed to not eat.
Right, so that's sell all of that.
Yeah, so selling it also during Passover, there's a lot of debates over that. That's a different debate. Just like selling bread during Passover instead of ingesting it. Am I allowed to do that? For instance, I can be a pig farmer and sell ham to non-Jews, and that is completely legally kosher to do during the year. It's not about selling it, it's about ingesting it.
Yeah.
But
you're also not only selling not the food in your house, you're selling anything that's tumetz. For example, you're selling your dishwasher,
right,
your your microwave oven.
You can do that as well.
I mean, that was also not kosher for Passover. You should not be using that, basically. So it's
right.
Someone else.
Well, I mean, you can clean everything. The microwave's really easy. You can clean that out. That's, but you're right. The rules for Passover are more strict because unlike regular kashrut, there are rules about selling the stuff also, where it's in regular kashrut, you're allowed to sell stuff. So it's a little bit more strict for Passover in terms of what you can or can't do.
Yeah, I have some friends who actually they're able to afford it. They actually have a Passover kitchen in their basement.
Nice. Yeah, and again, some people can afford 2 refrigerators and some people can't. So again, if you can afford to do more than you do, but again, you can only do what you can do. And so, and of course, in America, there are 4, in America, there are 4 days, holy days of Passover. In Israel, there's only 2 if you're Orthodox or conservative. So Passover is 8 days long in America for those who are more traditional. The first 2 days and the last 2 days, if you own a store, it has to be closed anyway. So you're only talking 4 days of Passover when your store can be open anyway. So it may be just easier to close altogether because if nobody's shopping and you can save money on not paying people or people they take off. So a lot of places just close.
Are there any restrictions on clothing during Passover? I mean, because it could be at the you could take it so far as to say, well, this particular type of cloth was in the presence of, chametz. I ate bread while I was wearing this shirt.
That is a good question. I think as long as it is cleaned beforehand, you're fine. So all your clothes should be cleaned if you're cooking in them. That is definitely the case. You actually have to go in the laundry room and actually, you'd have to look for chametz, but it's just, you easier to clean all your clothes, and then you can do that. Once you clean the clothes, that should be enough. Stuart.
Moving the topic slightly, do you know if there's a relationship between all of the food rules of Pesach and the concept of Lent in Christianity, where again, during the Lenten period, which has a relationship to Passover, there's the idea of giving up certain foods for Lent?
That is a good question. I would imagine, yes, that there's got to be a coincidence, something that's connected. I don't know if it's admitted, but it doesn't seem very likely that there wasn't some sort of connection in some way, considering it's the same time of year, found in the same area. But also self-denial has been a practice in a lot of different cultures for a long time. So self-denial, of course, for Judaism goes way back, all the way to Yom Kippur, where it literally says self-denial and Passover. But I don't know the history. I would imagine there's got to be some connection. I think I remember, again, especially early on as Christianity is trying to separate from Judaism and try and convince people to go with them. I would imagine I would say almost certainly yes, but I haven't looked that one up yet in a while. That's a good question. All right, let's continue on. Sorry, Larry.
A point comes to mind. The Muslim version of kosher, what is it called? Halal?
Well, yeah. Halal.
I was watching a program and someone said to a Muslim, "What would you eat if you couldn't get halal?" He says, "We would eat kosher."
Yeah, that's true.
Which one is what's the word? Which one is stricter?
Kosher is a lot stricter. And so that's why a Muslim can say, I will just eat kosher food because it's more strict. So you're guaranteed. So a Jewish person could not say the same for halal because they're not as strict. So for a very long time, the Muslims in America who were strict ate kosher food, which is really ironic if you think about the issues of in the Middle East. In recent years, though, there has been a push to create a halal type of mark as well, so that they will have their own food. So it's become a lot more popular to do it themselves, but a lot of them will just eat kosher foods and have no problem with it. Kashrut is much stricter in the way they clean, the separation. It's like way beyond. All right, so let's talk about some of the other things that we wanted to talk about. I had somebody ask about, which we've talked about before, but some of the Passover traditions in other countries. And that's always fun because some of them are still kept today in descendants from these countries. Some of them are not, because obviously after generations, you start marrying people of other traditions. But what are some of the traditions? The most famous one, of course, is the one from Afghanistan, from various other Jewish communities, I think in North Africa and Persia, and that is whipping yourself with scallions. That's the most famous, or whipping others with scallions. You're not supposed to do it in a way that it hurts, by the way, but it's just like you do it to obviously remember the ancestors who were, killed and whipped because of what they were doing. So the slave drivers whipped them, so we use it. So that's a really neat. In Poland, one of the interesting ones is they used to reenact the story in one particular area of Poland. They would reenact the crossing of the Red Sea by pouring water onto their floor.
Oh, God.
And then they'd walk, lift up their pants and walk across it. In India, in Cochin, which is in southern India, which was the famous old Jewish community, there's only, I don't know if there's any Jews left. There was only like one or two last time I checked. They were very strict about chametz. Very strict, much more strict than in most places. They would start preparing for Passover 100 days before the Seder. It was considered very bad luck and bad juju to have any chametz in the house. So they had special rooms where they had all the Passover stuff. And then they would completely repaint sometimes and re-clean their entire house every year before Passover. They drained their pipes. They would do everything. They'd go clean in the cracks in the walls. So it was a very strict way. And it basically started after Hanukkah. And then you'd usually, you actually repaint your house after Purim. Because I guess their Purim traditions were very messy. So that's a joke. They don't have no idea. So that's a really interesting one. In Gibraltar, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of there, which of course is off the coast of Spain. They would actually put dust from bricks into their harosets to eat. So you're actually eating the dust from bricks. I don't know if that changed the taste, but who knows? I have a feeling that you had a lot more severe stomach problems there than other places. Ethiopians, of course, many of whom moved to Israel, they had a new way of separating the plates and dishes for Passover. They would take all the dishes in their house and they would break them all, throw them away, and make new dishes just for Passover. And so every year they would get new dishes. They break all the dishes and every year make new dishes. I assume they kept those same dishes all year round because if it's used for Passover, you can use it for the rest of the year. You just can't use it for Passover again. So, yes, Stuart.
We had a kosher resort hotel in the family. My uncle owned it.
Oh, cool. I think you told us that. That's right.
We restocked for Passover. That's when it totally changed the dishes because you had to get, during the year, there's a fair amount of attrition of dishes anyway. So each year you do the purchase of new dishes just in time for Passover, introduce them for Passover, and they got used. They were added to the inventory for the succeeding year.
Very cool. And a lot of us, that's a very common thing even in the liberal world, is having special plates for Passover. I mean, you may not use them the whole time, but many people, we at this point use, I think my grandmother and April's grandmother's china, and we use that for Passover. But don't quote me on that because I don't remember exactly what plates we're using. And maybe it was I don't remember now. I used to have my own separate plates, but we do things a little differently now. So another tradition that is really interesting is in Syria. They used to take matzah and other parts of Passover, put it in a knapsack, and throw it over their shoulders and carry it around saying specific verses in Arabic. Basically, people asking, what are you carrying? They'd say, we're carrying matzah. So it was kind of a way to physically show you're doing something. So as you can imagine, anybody could do that. If they were lighter knapsacks, children could do it. In Hungary, they used to wear their finest jewelry in gold and silver during the Seder because our ancestors, when they were leaving Egypt, they asked and were given gold and silver and jewels from the Egyptians as kind of like a late payment for being slaves all those years, depending on how you look at it. So in Yemen, they would eat a lot of eggs. And so basically they'd add eggs to almost everything. It would be egg cakes, they'd have potatoes and eggs, fried eggs. And so basically eggs were really the center of the main meal for the Yemenite Jews. I think a lot of them still do that, excuse me. Obviously, one of the traditions that has become very popular everywhere is the 10 drops of wine. So a lot of communities do that. Some that when they use the glass you used for the 10 drops of wine, you didn't throw away or dispose of. Like, it's a glass that's specifically for that one moment. So, and then there's a few others. I'm sure others here know of others. Another one that a lot of people have used is during the Seder, you take the parsley, you say something in Arabic, and then you cross the parsley in the hands from one shoulder to the other shoulder, and you say a blessing. So it's kind of like a passing of the parsley, or, you know, passing it like this, or more like this. So it's just, that's a tradition I'm not seen before, but I remember. Larry.
Yeah, most Jewish holidays are one day, maybe two the most. Passover seems to be a real exception in that, you know, we wandered for 40 years and then they set aside 7 or 8 days. What was the rationale for making it a week or the 7 days rather than just a 1 or 2 night holiday compared to the other holidays?
That's a good question. It doesn't specifically say in the Bible. However, some might think it was connected to Sukkot, which is also a 7-day holiday, 8 or 9 depending. Sukkot they're both the most important rain festivals. Sukkot is when you pray for rain. Passover is when you pray for rain to stop. It may have something to do with the fact that the rainy season and dry season does not start on the exact day every year, and this gives you a longer option. Another would be for Passover, the restrictions. Not eating chametz for 1 day is not really that big a deal. It's not a struggle at all. It's not even denial. Not everybody eats bread every day anyway. And so, but a week, you know, most people eat bread, you know, obviously without not counting the diets of the modern world, but bread is a staple. Some type of bread is a staple in so many cultures. So not eating bread for a whole week when it's the staple of your diet, that is a bigger deal. So that may be it as well. All right. Any questions so far?
And Noel has a hand up.
Oh, no, sorry about that. So Noel, what's up?
You always ignore me.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to ignore you, but I don't have everybody on the screen. I'm going to go back and do that. Sorry.
Okay,
Actually, I do. I do. Yeah.
I had a wonderful experience. I had a student who was a member of a family who were Mexican Jews. They immigrated to Mexico probably at the time of, you know, the expulsion of Jews from Spain. And so her mother used to bake taco matzahs. You know, they were totally kosher, and they were round matzahs, and she used to bring them to my house every year at Passover, and I have never tasted anything as wonderful as a taco.
Well, matzah does not have to be in a square. That's more of a modern thing because it's easier to put in the box. And it's easier, I think, to go on the machines and put the little holes in it. So if you get shmura matzah, I don't know when it started, but the square matzah, I think, is because of the factories. So before that, I think most of the time it was round. So if you're in countries where they make their own matzah by hand, they still may be doing it round because obviously when you're making something, it's easier to do it in a circle like a pizza or like tortillas than in a square if you're doing it yourself. Michael.
Oh, no, I was going to ask if anybody knows any place around here where you can get shmira matzah. We used to buy it for years, and
maybe in Savannah. Probably.
Michael, I can give it to you. I have a source available. Chabad will be happy to give you a box, but I have some in the house.
Okay.
Because I've been helping him distribute.
And if you want some organization sends me shmura matzah every year. And every year I get it about 2 or 3 weeks after Passover. So you're welcome to have that. I don't know who it is. They just send me shmura matzah. It's not cheap, so I'm very appreciative. I don't know how I got on the list. So shmura just means super extra, careful. So what are some other things we can talk about in the next 20 minutes? Sorry, Jeff.
No, just another tradition in the Caucasus, the Jews there, instead of hunting for matzah in the Afikoman, hunted for an egg.
Oh,
instead.
really?
So that's another tradition that we often have not heard of.
Looking for the egg. Oh, that's such a great tradition. I'm so glad that we've monopolized that one.
I wonder if they adopted it from the Easter egg hunt.
I don't
Could
know.
be, it could have gone that way. It really could, it could go either way. We all borrow things from other religions and give things to other religions. So any other questions or thoughts before we talk a little bit more? I just picked a wide range of subjects. One of them, of course, I like to talk about is why the cup of Elijah. And there's a very interesting reason why Elijah is chosen. Now, first of all, who is Elijah? Obviously, Elijah is a prophet found in the book of Kings, First Kings. And he is interesting in many ways, but one of them is because he's a prophet. Well, some would say a very famous prophet, but he doesn't have his own books. You know, most of the famous prophets have their own books, except for Elijah and Elisha. So why does Elijah get his cup? Well, one is obvious because he never dies, because he's one of the two characters who doesn't die in the Bible. He's taken up into heaven. And so after defeating the prophets of Baal, and so he never dies. And in Malachi, it says, I will send the prophet Elijah before the awesome, fearful day of God, basically. And so that is used to create the idea that Elijah is the person who will come to the homes to tell us that the Messiah is coming. So that's why he's become part of Passover, but it also has to do with a major debate. That's why he is part of the process. What was the debate? The debate, as always, was how many glasses of wine do you drink? And the debate between the rabbi was between the number 4 and the number 5. Do you drink 4 glasses of wine, or do you drink 5 glasses of wine? And so this is from, I believe, the Mishnah, and it's the Mishnah. And the debate is why. So why do we drink 4 glasses of wine? It comes from the promises of God in the Torah. I will free you. I will deliver you. I will redeem you. I will take you to be my people. So those are the 4 promises in a row. But just a few passages later, it says, I will bring you into the land, which is 5. So there are 5 passages, but 4 are next to each other, and a 5th one is later. And so it was eventually, after great debate, decided that we'll have 4 official glasses, but we'll have a 5th glass. And then they decided we'll bring in Elijah for the 5th glass because he never died. And we have this passage from Malachi, which has been taken to mean the idea that he is going to come before the Messiah in the future. And so that's how Elijah became part of Passover.
Could you
Jeff,
repeat, what was the fifth,
Larry, Michael?
what was the fifth cup for?
5th cup is I will bring you into the land.
Ah, okay, thank you.
But again, remember, I don't know if this, has to do with the fact they were divided or the time period where they weren't sure they were going to go into the land of Israel. Larry.
Yeah, just another thought about the numbers. I think, as I remember in the opening table of contents, sort of, for this Passover Seder book, isn't there like numbers 1 through 4? Is it 14? Are there 14 separate events that take place during the Seder?
Oh, you mean basically the things you do, yeah. And you have to do all of those. So if you go to a Haggadah, at the very beginning, it'll have a list of the things you have to do for Passover. I didn't bring it to you. We'll talk about that next week. And it's the order of the Seder, basically. That's why it's called Seder, because it's order, and there's an order of all the things you need to do. So Ron has got one of them, and if you look at the very beginning, somewhere in the beginning, and I'll show next week. We'll do that when we look at the Haggadah.
But
I'm sorry, Larry.
the number 14 then, I thought came from, was it the number of steps that you had to take in order to get to the temple? There was some correlation, I thought, between that number and, some symbology that people had come up with, that rabbis had come up with, is like a magic number of why they use that particular order.
There's always a magic number. It is 14. So that is the magic number. So why is it 14? I'm trying to remember why it's 14.
I thought it had to do with the number of steps in entering the temple.
It could be, is it the steps for the temple? Or I think, I'm going to say it's the steps for, I can't remember if it's a step for the temple or steps for something else.
Okay.
And maybe it's probably the temple. I don't remember. I should remember this. This is an obvious one. So I'll have to look that up. Anybody want to look that up? I'll look that up right now. It's 14 steps for, let's see if we can find it. Let's see here. Is it from the door? Let's see here. We're going to look at it. 14 steps. Let me try this. Where was that?
Well, ask you a question.
I know. I mean, it's called the 14 steps of the Seder, but I don't remember if it's like an actual. I don't remember. I don't remember what it was. Sorry about that. Completely forgot that. All right. So something to look up for next week.
Rabbi,
Yes.
what was the fourth? Free you, deliver you, redeem you, and what was the fourth, please?
Cups.
Of the cups.
Oh, the cups. It's going to be I free you, redeem you. No, free you, deliver you, redeem you, and then you'll be my people.
Okay.
And then the last one is take you to the land of Israel. So it's free, deliver, redeem, take, land. All right. Is everybody, oh, Jane, sorry, you had a question, sorry.
When
You
you
left off with blood and fire and pillars of smoke. That was the last thing we talked about.
I'm sorry, Jane, I can't hear you. Would you say a little louder?
when you teach
Kind of connect last week's class to this week's
about
class.
Eliyahu,
Moving from Dom to Aish for Sinas Ashram, which we explained.
Sorry.
somebody's talking about Eliyahu.
We can explain.
Okay. So let me go. So Jane, Larry, would you just unmute, please? There you go, Jane, sorry.
Okay. When you're teaching about Eliyahu, if you were in a class, do you teach him as the prophet that's going to announce the coming of the Messiah, correct?
Mhm.
But that would mean that the earth was going to change. When I was a kid, I used to say, I don't want him to come to our house because I'm like it here.
That's right.
It's just a weird concept that, everybody will die and you'll come alive again.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Again, not everybody believes in the idea of Messiah or the Messianic age, but those who do believe it's going to be a lot better than what we have today. I mean, obviously, you're not going to wait for something that's worse, hopefully.
Obviously, it will be.
But hopefully it will be. And if it's not, then we're all in real trouble. Oh, can you imagine we get back to heaven and say, you know what? There's no Netflix here. There's no access to, parks, and I want to go, to Disney World. I mean, so, Stuart.
You mentioned Elijah's cup. There are two modern additions in a sense, and I wonder if you discuss them briefly. One is Kos Miriam, and the other is the orange.
And we'll conclude with this, and because we're going to talk about the Seder a little bit next time. But obviously, Miriam has become a key figure in the modern world as the issues of women's rights have become so important. So because she's connected with water, her name obviously means water in one spell, in one way you pronounce it. It can mean bitter as well. That Miriam's cup has been placed to show a little bit about women's rights. The orange is an interesting one because there's the Baba Mice, the urban legend that turns out to be true. It used to be the there was a story that everybody believed. It was just that, it was women, I think, or women were saying we want to have something different at the Seder, or the women rabbis or something like that. Yeah. That some rabbis said there shouldn't be any women rabbis. The day a woman is a rabbi, there should be an orange at the Seder table and on the Seder plate. And that's the famous urban legend. It's absolutely not true. The orange came because the members of a gay rights community were talking to Susanna Heschel, who was Abraham Joshua Heschel's daughter, who was a rabbi. And they were saying, well, we want, women have representation at the table, Miriam's cup. We're ostracized. We want to have something at the table too. We want to put bread at the table to represent the gay rights community. And Rabbi Heschel said, I think it's great that you should be represented at the table, but you shouldn't take a food that is against the rules in the first place. So why don't you pick something like an orange? Because there's nothing that says an orange can't be on it, whereas bread. So that's why it was chosen. So it's a symbol of the gay rights community. Originally, of course, it's changed in many ways since. So, but we'll talk next week about the Seder itself and some of the other things. And if you have any questions, let me know beforehand. Is everybody going to be able to go to Seder, come to a virtual Seder, or have access to food for Passover Seder?
Yeah.
Okay, Terry, you getting it from here as well? And okay, no, sorry, and everybody, because I know you're a little farther out. All right, good. All right, so again, the Seder will be, I think, 6 p.m. a week from Saturday, and hopefully everybody will be able to join us. And if you have any questions or need anything, let me know. It's great that I'll be able to celebrate the Seder with people who are in another city, which everyone on this Zoom call is in a different city than me. We've got Houston. We've got, it's Waynesboro where you live. Terry, what's the name of the city you're?
I'm not near city. I'm near Brooklet. It's my mailing address.
Brooklet and Bluffton. All right. So I'm glad I'll be able to celebrate the Seder with everyone, and I hope you guys have a good one. So stay safe. And if anybody needs anything, let us know. And if not, I'll see you next week as we continue our talk on Passover.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have a good one.
Very nice.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Always awesome.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Be well.
Happy Passover.